My name's Deputy Inspector General of Police, Dr. Shehu, PSC. To talk about PRAWA, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, we have a very, very good rapport, good understanding, and good synergy between the police and PRAWA for many years. It is an institution that concerns primarily on respect of dignity and human rights, which the police are supposed to be part of it. And also capacity building to the police to enable them to perform effectively and efficiently in conjunction with the fundamental respect to the fundamental human rights as enshrined into the Nigerian Constitutions of 1999. It's very, very beneficial, and at the same time in building capacity and enabling the police officers to perform credibly when they go out to discharge their duties. The police is an organization that deals with all kinds of human beings. When they come across a police officer, they deserve to be respected by police in ensuring not only their security and safety, but also in respecting their dignity and human rights. So in a nutshell, the training and retraining we are getting from the PRAWA is to enable us have police that will function and discharge their duties in a most standard and acceptable manner by members of the public. At this juncture, I want to say kudos. Welcome to the Nigerian Police Force online training.
You're welcome to today's online human rights training for police officers. Today, the topic we will be looking at is gender and human rights. Before I go to the course content, I would like to let us understand the importance of this particular topic. It is related to the development of our nation. The rights of men, women, girls, boys, being equally protected without any form of discrimination will speak to a lot of things. It will speak to the development of our nation. Men must move at the same pace with women if we must develop. As you know, a bird cannot fly with one wing. Any nation leaving the women behind is like a bird flying with one wing and can never soar. Now to the course content. The content of this course are 7 in number. We are going to look at women's rights are human rights, policing and the protection of the rights of women and other vulnerable groups, policing and gender-based violence, protection of women in emergency and conflict situations, gender lens in handling human trafficked victims, policing female offenders, criminals, and human security using gender lens, and finally, promoting gender mainstreaming in Nigerian police institution and work. Now you see that everything we are going to talk about here today connects to you as a police officer. Now, the question that I expect should be going on in your mind, or you should be interrogating now, is, as a police officer, what should be my contribution to the development of this nation in terms of ensuring that the rights of both men and women are protected? Now, to the introduction. Where are we coming from in this discussion? First of all, the issue around attaining equality between women and men and eliminating all forms of discriminations against women are fundamental human rights and United Nations values. I pray that this goes into us very well. Now again, women around the world regularly suffer violations of their human rights throughout their lives, and realizing women's human rights has not always been a priority for many nations. And you know the reason. The reason of patriarchy. Patriarchy, you know, has always been there, where men are seen to be more privileged than women. Number 3 is achieving equality between women and men requires a comprehensive and holistic understanding of the ways in which women experience discrimination and are denied equality, so as to develop appropriate strategies to eliminate such discrimination. So you see, all that we are discussing are going around 2 major issues: the issues around equality and the issues around non-discrimination. Now, the basic facts and concepts of gender and human rights, what do we plan to do? This is answering this question. So it is about, what are the basic facts? What are the basic concepts of gender and human rights? How do we address these issues and connect them to the day-to-day performance of police duties? Number 2, we are going to look at international, regional, and national human rights instruments on gender and human rights. Number 3, we are going to highlight major obstacles to the enjoyment of human rights and issues of gender and human rights in policing. And I believe at the end of the day, we will equally be looking at the recommendations. Next, we are now going to take the very first model, and that model talks about women's rights are human rights. Now, let us understand why this question is asked. Why are we asking the question as to, or stating the fact that women's rights are human rights? I would like to introduce us to this topic by making reference to Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and their rights. This answers our question. So, is a woman a human being? If you are able to answer that question in the affirmative, it then simply means that human rights is women's rights. Now, by way of introduction also, I would like us to critically look at the philosophical foundation of human rights. Human rights is based on what I have mentioned earlier, the principles of equality, dignity, and non-discrimination. And what does that mean? It means that we must include men and women, boys and girls, in every discussion. These rights that we are talking about, human rights, can never be taken away from any individual, no matter who the person is, no matter whether the person is a man or a woman, a boy or a girl. Now, let us go to the objective of this session. First of all, The objective is to achieve certain important things regarding the protection of everyone, especially women. How do we go about building the competencies of police officers in protecting the rights of women and other vulnerable groups? That includes persons with disability, survivors of sexual violence, women in emergencies and conflict situations, trafficked persons, commercial sex workers, and female suspects or criminals. So the target, you have seen why we are talking, why we are discussing. We are trying to find solution to issues around the abuse of certain persons, including women, other vulnerable persons, as we have mentioned. Now, it is important to note the following: that the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, especially Articles 2, 5, 11, and 16, require state parties to protect women against violence of any kind occurring within the family, workplace, or in any other area of social life. Then we equally have the regional instrument, which is the Protocol on the Rights of Women in Africa, the optional protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Another name for it is Maputo Protocols. This calls for the adoption and implementation of measures to protect women from all forms of violence, whether sexual or verbal, in public or private. Of course, you know that some women suffer violence, not physical violence, but verbal violence, mental violence, when they are continually talked down on. Now, we go to a very important area, because some people may be wondering now, what is this gender we are talking about? So, for us to understand what is gender and human rights concepts, let us look at the different concepts of gender. Number one is sex. Now, what is sex? Simply put, sex is the biological differences between women and men. And I would like us to understand one important thing about sex. Sex, number one, can describe somebody as either being a male or a female. These are the two well-known ones. Before we go on, I know that some may be thinking now, what about hermaphrodites? What about persons that have gone into transgender and other things, talking about gender rights and the rest of them? But for the purpose of our discussion today, we want to pay particular attention to just male and female. The biological differences that just describes this is a man, this is a woman. And why so? We don't want to go into the intricacies of transgender and the rest of them, because of the fact that here in Nigeria today, we have a law that prohibits same-sex what? Marriage. And being police officers, we are supposed to be implementing and enforcing these laws. So we go straight and attend to issues around just male and female. We equally know that there are some biologically that have issues in terms of being being bisexual. Those ones is a biological issues, and they can be equally discussed. But today we are talking male and female. Now, what are the attributes of male and female that should be of interest to us? Is that the fact that their different attributes are biologically rooted. They are permanent. You cannot change them. They remain there. They are not amenable to change. And they are universal. So when you come to America, a man in America has the same biological composition as the man in Nigeria, the man in UK, the man in any other part of the world. So it is with women. Naturally, it's not amenable to change. Although under the knife of medical doctors, this can be changed. But that is not the subject of discussion today. Now, when we come to gender, gender is said to be social constructions. And to break it down, what that means is, how do we, in terms of sociology, in terms of religion, in terms of politics, and the rest of them, interpret that difference between man and the woman? When you hear a man and you are dealing with issues of religion, what comes to your mind? When you are dealing with issues of politics, what comes to your mind? When you are dealing with issues of sociology, the social background, and the rest of them, what comes to your mind? That's why we say that gender is social constructs. Now, if we must understand gender concepts, there are certain things we must bear in mind. First of all, we look at issues that can draw us behind, that is causing this discussion today. That after talking about human rights and the human rights of everybody, we are singling out human rights and gender, because this has been dealing a big blow on the implementation of human rights laws. One of the issues that arise are issues of gender stereotypes. And what is gender stereotype? Gender stereotype is overgeneralization about the characteristics of an entire group based on gender. They most often tend to promote inequality between males and their females, resulting in overt and covert discrimination against women in almost all spheres of public and private life. Gender stereotypes also limit women's ability and capability and undermine their integrity, promote violence against women, and ultimately leads to the violation of women's human rights. So those overgeneralizations are what we call stereotypes. A woman should be a nurse, while a man should be a medical doctor. She is a woman now. Why must she go into politics? Overgeneralization. Women talk too much. That is the reason why a woman comes to report and you are now saying, don't mind her. This one that the husband has beaten her up, she must have been talking toro. That is the reason. That is what we call stereotyping. A woman should not do this. A man should do that. A woman should be entitled to certain opportunities. Or rather, men should be entitled to certain opportunities which are denied women. So accessing important opportunities become a big issue for women. And it gets to their not being able to access important things around economy. And once a woman does not have money, she is easily battered. Now, you look at the terms of gender equality, gender inequality, and gender equity. If you look at the picture we have, can you take that picture we have there? It properly describes what we are talking about. Look at the very first photograph. You see what we call gender inequality. Two people have gone to access services. One is very tall, is an adult. One is short, is a child. And the adult that is tall is even given a stool to stand up so that he can see what is being presented. While the child, which is shorter than the adult, is not given any. So that child is not seeing anything at all. That is what happens between men and women in some circumstances. Women are not able to access opportunities to develop themselves. Now we have equality. And that is where, obviously, you are seeing that two people are not of the same height. But you are providing them with the equal opportunity to access the information on the board. One person is still left behind, and that is the shorter person. Now, when equality becomes, adds up to equity, you are now considering certain things. You are considering the fact that not only is this person taller, this person has opportunity to see better than the other person. Okay, what can we do? Let us make them to have equal access to the opportunity of learning what is on the board by providing the tall person with one stool and the shorter person with two stools. At the end of the day, both the tall and the short person are looking at the board. That is when equity meets with equality. Now, inequality leads to a lot of things. It leads to human rights abuse. It limits women's access to power and decision-making tables. It makes women to suffer what we call the glass ceiling. That's why in the time past, it's only recently that you started seeing women becoming heads of big institutions, heads of big organizations, even both in the private and in the public. Till today, within the Nigerian Police Force, no woman has been appointed Inspector General of Police. Just think about it. That is what stereotyping women can lead to. Unfortunately, in our Police Act, we are happy today that that act has been amended. What we now have is a Police Reform Act, which may have taken care of all the complaints that have been made around gender. Before, in the Police Act, the job of a police officer that is a female is to carry tea. Saucer and what? Tea. While all the men are rising, the women are going behind. Now, what do we do to solve this seeming problem? We now look at what we call gender mainstreaming. And what is gender mainstreaming? This is a strategy to support the goal of gender equality. It has two major dimensions. One is integration of gender equality concerns into the analysis and formulations of all policies, programs, and projects. At this point, I wish to state here that, in fairness to the Nigerian Police Force, they have their gender policy, which has tried to take care of these challenges. But the question we will be asking ourselves is, how much of this gender policy is being implemented? Now, we equally look at initiatives that will enable women as well as men to formulate and express their views and participate in decision-making across all development issues. And you start querying. If you are in Nigeria, you are a Nigerian, you are a police officer, you check how much of this is happening. From the National Assembly to the state assemblies, how many women are found there? But let us address the one that concerns us most. What should be the gender-sensitive approach to these challenges? And what is gender-sensitive approach? First of all, we have, it is a rights-based approach which maintains that discrimination against women and girls is a fundamental denial of their human rights. It equally recognizes that women, compared to men, are differently and inequitably situated in the society in such a way that their roles and the gender stereotypes affect everything that they do in life. We equally look at the recognition that women also have different and unique needs, which ought to be attended to. You may be asking, what is this unique need? Men and women, as we have said, have biological differences. In terms of biology, there are roles that men, play, and there are roles that women play. It is the job of men, by virtue of their biological, attributes, to impregnate women. And it is the job of the women to carry the pregnancy for 9 months. After that, they are equally expected to take care of the children. What are the policies that we are making in our workplace to ensure that these women are given the opportunity to grow while they perform these unique duties? Now, we also need human rights orientation, which is responsive to gender differences and disparities. Now, what is gender-sensitive policing? This is critical. It simply means that police officers should exercise due diligence to prevent, investigate, and make arrests for all acts of violence against women, whether perpetrated by public officials or private persons in the home, community, or official institutions. Again, it simply means that any violence against women, including those occurring within the family, should be investigated and attended to. That arrested or detained women should not suffer discrimination and should be protected from all forms of violence or exploitation while in custody. Now, women's rights principles, standards, and their rationale. Women are generally and often subjected to discrimination. We have said that. Now, the legal framework safeguarding the rights of women is not contained in any single document. There are several laws protecting the rights of women. Some of the international instruments, as we have mentioned earlier, are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, the Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Security Council Resolution, and the rest of them. What is the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, saying? Number one, we must recognize that it is a legally binding international human rights instrument. It defines human rights principles, concepts that relate to women. Now, the three major principles of this convention is substantive equality, not equality in paper. It must be in fact, in action, in law, non-discrimination, and the obligation of the state to ensure that this happens. Now, what is the rationale for the special treaty on women's rights? We need a special treaty on women's rights because women's rights were not automatically recognized in the mainstream of human rights discourse and the human rights proclamations and practice. Now, there is equally general lack of respect for women's social and economic rights across cultures. So it is important that we have a special treaty for women to ensure that there is accountability for rights violations by states. Now, what should be possible solutions to gender inequalities and gender discriminations? First of all, we must guarantee women and men equal rights and opportunities. Treat men and women the same before the law. Sensitize both women and men of their rights, especially women. So make sure that whatever happens in public and private life is taken care of according to the law. it is all important, as we have started discussing, that we need to incorporate human rights and gender-sensitive model in the training curricula of military and paramilitary institutions. We have started with you, Nigerian Police. We should also establish gender-responsive regulations, procedure, and practices in the Nigerian Police Force necessary for the protection of female police officers. The Nigerian Police Force gender policy is important in this case. We should also train the human rights desk officers within the human rights unit of the respective police divisional headquarters to handle all gender-related cases that are reported. Very, very important. So that it will not be only in the state capitals or at the headquarters, force headquarters, that all these will be maintained. It needs to go across all the police divisions, all the police stations within the country. Thank you.